while you are turning to James chapter 3, I want you, when you get there, to mark it. And mark James chapter 3. That's where we'll be preaching, but then I want you to turn back to the book of Psalms. Psalms chapter 39, and we're going to be reading the first 3 verses here of Psalms 39. Psalms 39 says, I will take heed of my ways, that I sin not with my tongue. I will keep my mouth with a bridle while the wicked is before me. I was dumb with silence, and I held my peace, even from good, and my sorrow was stirred. My heart was hot within me, and while I was musing, or while I was thinking, that says, the fire burned, then spake I with my tongue. You know, I think one of the greatest lessons we could learn was to think before we speak. To think before we speak. You realize that the average person every day, I don't know if somebody went around with a clicker or not, but I got this off the internet. The average person speaks up to 30,000 words each day, or enough to fill a good-sized book. Each one of us is writing a life by the things we say. Each one of us. What people hear us say and the words we speak, they make judgments of us. They see who we are and what we are. And according to the book of James, these people were having a real issue with this problem of probably speaking before they were thinking. You look at James chapter 1, verse number 9, James dealt with this issue when he said in James 1:19, not 1:9, it says, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak. Meaning, hear everything else before you speak, and slow to wrath. Verse 26 talks about if any man among you seem to be religious, or a believer, or act in a faith-based way, he says, and bridles not his tongue, but he deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is in vain. Chapter 2, verse 12 said this in that same thing. So speak ye, and so do, as they shall be judged by the law of liberty. Again, mentioning the speech or something said. Chapter 4, verse 11 says, speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his own brother speaketh evil of the law and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. You can look at chapter 5, verse number 12. It says, above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath. Yet let your yes be yes, or your yea be yea, and your no be no, lest you fall into condemnation. So obviously, just from, then you look at chapter 3, half of the chapter is devoted just simply to what we talk about. And so, if you think in our day and time we struggle with the things that we say, we're not any different from first century Christianity, because the very first book in the New Testament, a large portion of it is written based upon the things we say. We go and we look around our world today. We can look at Congress. And again, the rhetoric that comes out of Congress and the things people say there. We could look at just simply in the sports world, and we can look at the things said there, or entertainment. People say things, and it is important because, and this is what I think is the most important, it is an indication of their spiritual life. And it's an indication of their heart. You can go back to Matthew chapter 12. Jesus Christ was dealing with the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 12. He had come, and in Matthew chapter 12, he had healed somebody. He had healed somebody that was possessed, demon-possessed, was blind, couldn't speak. You'd think people would rejoice. But then in verse number 24, the Pharisees heard that. They said, This fellow doth not cast out devils, but by Beelzebub, the prince of devils, meaning that they did not believe what Jesus Christ was doing. They didn't think that he was the Son of God. They thought he was coming from the devil. And so Jesus Christ begins, in a sense, a sermon based to them, starting in verse number 25. But I want you to look at verse number 33 real quick. It says this: either make a tree good and his fruit good, or else make a tree corrupt and his fruit corrupt, for the tree is known by his fruit. Meaning, plain and simple, an apple tree is not going to produce oranges. And something that is inside a person is where the words come. Like he says in verse number 34, O generation of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart a man speaks. Out of the abundance of his heart. Our indication, one of the greatest indications of our spirituality is the things we say. And how we say, and how we talk. Obviously, it's important also to realize that the greatest power that we have as believers is the ability to speak and to present the truth of the gospel. James is going to describe in chapter 3 the power of the tongue. He's going to use some different pictures of that tongue. And I'm going to look at basically 3 things here in this chapter dealing with the things we say. Now, last week, I want you to just take if you can think back. I'm having problems. The older I get, I just can't think back as far as I used to. But I want you to think back this past week. How many times did your mouth get you in trouble? Whether it was the things you said or the things you didn't say. Maybe the words, maybe at work you were going and you said something you shouldn't. Maybe at home you said something to your spouse that you shouldn't. Or you used a crossword, a mean word to your spouse. Maybe teenagers to your parents said something you shouldn't. Maybe as parents to our children. I want you just to think, last week, did my tongue get me in trouble? And that is an indication of what, folks? As we said it again, it's an indication of what's in here. And I want you to ask yourself, what am I saying? How am I saying the things I'm looking at? The very first thing that he talks about here in verses 1 through 4 is the power to direct something. My language and my words have a power to direct. It says, my brethren, be not many masters in James 3:1, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. Again, he's a good preacher because he includes himself in this whole situation. He says, for in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, able to also bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in horses' mouth that they may obey us, and we turn about the whole body. Behold also ships, which though they be great, are driven by fierce winds, yet they are turned about with a very small helm. And that's the old English word for rudder there. It's not talking about the guy up in the captain's booth with the big wheel. It's talking about the rudder there that's directing the ship whithersoever the governor listeth. Joseph Parker said this, the tongue may be small, but its influence is far out of proportion to its size. And I think we can all realize that. We all have a tremendous responsibility. Verse number 1, he talks about the many masters there, or many teachers would be another way to read that. And we all are teachers, whether we are adults teaching our children or in our homes, or a father teaching his children, or a mother teaching their children, whether we are in the workplace. God has us there for a specific reason. In our work, we may be a boss or we may just be one of the workers, but we are there to add salt and light to a very dark world. We are there to preach the gospel and to make an influence on people around us. We might be at school and you might have the opportunity to witness. We all have great responsibility. You know, I guarantee you probably this. If we were to take a poll this morning, probably almost all of you got saved because somebody did what? Witness to you. Whether it was a Sunday school teacher teaching a Sunday school lesson, whether it was somebody preaching a sermon, whether it was somebody, a coworker or a friend comes and talks to you. But most of us were led to the Lord not by some movie or not by necessarily some radio thing or thing on the radio. Probably all of us were saved because somebody talked to us. And the great thing that we need to realize is this little thing in our mouth, we have a great responsibility to be a witness, to tell people about what the Lord has done in our life. Wonderful, the very fact that our missionary today was talking about that she is teaching sign language, and she's going to be teaching sign language. Another way, you may not be able to speak, but again, the very ability to communicate is a tremendous, tremendous responsibility. Because this little thing, as Parker says, it has a great ability for good or bad. He said there that it is small, but he uses two illustrations. He uses the fact that the tongue can change something very powerful. The tongue can change a horse. He says the tongue is like a bit in a horse's mouth. That a horse is powerful. A horse is strong. Here to you, a horse is much stronger than the man that rides it, but because of that bit and because of that bridle, a person can turn that powerful horse. Even the greater illustration there is with the ship. He says a ship is in a huge storm, the great wind, yet it's that tiny rudder that can turn a whole ship in a storm. The tongue is so powerful. The tongue is so strong because it has the responsibility to change the course of somebody's life. The tongue is so powerful, and we have a great responsibility to see that if I use my words right, people can be changed. And people can do something great. We can think of even Brother Mike here, teaching the boys in Sunday school, or Donna teaching the ladies. When we think they, and Miss Patty teaching all the kids on Wednesday night, their words can change one child. And that one child can go and change other people. We go and we change the course of maybe one of the young men that Mike teaches, and all of a sudden that young man hears the truth of something, or hears about the Lord and wants to change and wants to be transformed in his life. And all of a sudden one person the whole path can be changed. And the whole path can go and do something great, not only for God, but the world in general. When we think, obviously, I'm excited, and I always like to talk about we need more missionaries, and we do, and we need more preachers, and yes, we do. But you know what? If Mike can go and teach a kid about the Lord, that boy changes his life, and all of a sudden the kid says, you know what? I'm gonna get saved, and he accepts Christ as his Savior, and that begins to change his life. And so he goes to school, and he realizes that Jesus wants him to be good at school and learn and not be a hellion to the teacher. Amen, teacher. And all of a sudden he starts to learn something, and all of a sudden he doesn't pretend, or he learns to like math and like science, and all of a sudden he can become a doctor and go and just change the course of people. You know, when we realize my words can have great impact that can change everything. We always used to say when we were growing up, you always heard the thing, well, someday you could be president. You know what? Our words can have